You're watching Inside the Right. We're obviously all waiting anxiously for the debate happening tomorrow evening between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Tim, you were a Republican for your entire life. What is Donald Trump seeking to do right now on that debate stage? What is his goal in advance of this debate?
Yeah, I do have to say, Brian, Donald Trump's strategies in debates is a little different than what my candidate strategies used to be, for
Yeah,
example. His methods, at least, certainly are different.
not a
But
lot
look,
of crossover in that Venn diagram between Jeb
yeah,
Bush and Donald Trump.
a little bit of crossover. So we'll talk about the areas where there's a little bit of crossover, and then the areas where, look, I used to prep Jeb for debating Trump, which didn't go well. So I can tell you what not to do. Look, here's the thing. I think that his main goal vis-a-vis Harris is trying to push her to into like the extremes on the policy issues, right? Like trying to define her as far left or as kind of a shapeshifter type of person you can't trust, right? Like that is going to be his main strategy. It's different than what it was for Biden, right? For Biden, he was trying to dominate him. It was like a strength versus weakness type of thing. I think that's tougher, particularly with a black woman. There'll be a little bit of that, but you can tell he feels a little bit more uncomfortable in that frame. You saw it with the National Association of Black Journalists that he gets uncomfortable in that frame. So I think instead here it's going to be she's a leftist, she's a Marxist, she's a communist, she's a phony, right? And sort of having that all sort of blend together. And some of that is going to be in traditional Republican territory, right? Like the types of things that Bush would have said to Kerry, right? Like, oh,
Yeah,
you're far, like the Massachusetts, it was Massachusetts in Kerry's case, it's California and Kamala's, right? This
right.
is far left. These states are expensive, crimes everywhere, like these traditional kind of issues. Government's too big, it's bad for the economy. And then there's going to be the stuff that only Trump does, right? Which is the gross stuff, the personal, the racially coded stuff, the outright racist stuff, maybe. And for him, to me, it's like the more he stays in bucket A, the better it's going to be for him. And the more he gets flustered and starts like talking about how she turned black or, whatever, how Haitian immigrants eat cats or who the hell knows, like where he goes tomorrow, like the more the crazy stuff, the worse it is for him.
Now, what about Kamala Harris's goal in all of this? What should she be seeking to do with Donald Trump? How can she bait him into presenting herself in the best light here?
Yeah, you got to think there are a couple groups of people she's talking to, right? And for my people, like the former Republican, high education, engaged suburban swing voters in Atlanta, Charlotte, Philly. For those voters, it's the same thing she was trying to do at the convention, right? Demonstrate that she, is not embracing the far left of the party, like demonstrating that she cares about the country, the basic constitutional rules of the country, unlike Donald Trump, that she believes in American strength in the world and American global leadership, and like just kind of past that commander-in-chief threshold bar. Like that's what she's trying to do for that group. And then I think you have this lesser engaged group of people that have become a key swing demographic, the type that don't really engage in the news that much. Um, it's across all racial demos. It tends to over-index on men. But those folks are going to see this debate, maybe half watch it. Maybe they see it on TikTok. Maybe they catch a clip of us talking about it. And so for that, she's going to need a couple of lines, I think, that demonstrate strength, where Trump is kind of this stand-in for Putin almost, right? And these people, these guys that are like, is she up for this? Is she, this kind of sexist undertone, right? Like, can she demonstrate that she can go toe to toe with him? She's strong enough to be the leader. She's strong enough to take on an adversary. And so I think that element is there, and she's gonna have to pick her spots. You don't want to be fighting with him all night, right? You want to introduce yourself, you want to talk about policies, you want to, demonstrate what your vision is, but you also want to take a couple shots at.
Here's the $1 million question. Who's more likely to achieve their goal in this debate?
I think Kamala is more likely, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. And I think that, I've seen a little bit of overconfidence out there. Here's the thing with Trump, man. He gets graded on a curve. It's bullshit. You can invite me back on Thursday for Inside the Right, and we can talk about all the ways that it's bullshit. Like no matter what he does, he's going to be graded on a curve, right? If he's terrible, it'll be okay. If he's okay, it'll be like, wow, look at Trump's discipline.
Right.
So like acknowledge that he gets graded on a curve, but within that curve, um, he was savvy in the Biden debate. There were opportunities where he could have tried to go in for the kill on Biden and been really over aggressive and had it backfire on him. You
Yeah.
saw that in the first Biden debate in 2020. You've seen it in the past in some of the primary debates. And so, I think that Trump, is a lot of times his own worst enemy. And so like whether he is able to kind of choose his spots, if he is, I do think that this kind of like this curve that we're talking about works to his benefit, right? And people start saying like, well, we've all been through this cycle a million times before. So I don't think it's a slam dunk. And I think that Kamala, while she's obviously stronger than him, obviously the substance will be better. The background is better. Like the prosecutor, the truth factor will be better. But she's got to be nervous. I do have to tell you, Brian, like prepping Jeb for these debates with Trump, it just is a different animal than like a normal politician debate. And I know that she's been VP and I know that she debated Mike Pence 4 years ago, but she hasn't had a ton of reps. She gets thrust into this gig and she's been practicing for a few days. But like, man, I just think the nerves are high. So look, I think that if she performs as she's been as since she's been the nominee, I think it's more likely that she does well, given how much of a clown Trump is. If she's nervous and he's restrained, like that's kind of those would be the two things I'd look for.
What's the biggest warning that you would give to Kamala Harris if you were advising her in the aftermath of what you've seen between Donald Trump and Joe Biden just a few months ago?
Yeah. Trump is like inhuman, well, in his cruelty, yes, but also just in his ability to like not have a normal conversation. Like he just doesn't converse like a human, right?
Yeah.
And so if you feel like you have to get in this position where it's like you said something and then Donald Trump takes that and then he rips off three lies in a row and he starts talking about something completely different and then the moderator says back to you without fact checking him, which is what's going to happen. uh, you can be tempted to feel like, okay, well, I got to fact check this crazy thing he said, and I got to reply to this insult he hit me with, and like you just have to resist that, right?
Yeah.
Like you kind of have to let some pitches go by because he is just spewing crazy constantly. So you have to choose your spots, right? Like I don't think you should ignore him completely and just speak to the camera. There should be some of that. You have to choose your spots to call him out when you feel like you're on sturdy ground, when you have a strong attack that you've been working on or that you feel like is an important contrast for a certain group of voters, and then do that. But not, the more you go round and round with him, the more you're on his turf.
And to that exact point, I think when we think back to the Trump administration, the most effective interview that a reporter held with him was probably Jonathan Swan because he
Swan.
didn't succumb to the gish gallop that Donald Trump was throwing at him. He just focused on one thing and beat that forward over and over and over again. And Donald Trump can't do that. He relies on his ability to just throw a bunch of shit against the wall and just completely inundate you with so much information that you couldn't possibly respond to it in the way that any normal human being could respond to anything. But when you like hammer away at just one specific topic and hold Trump to that, he flails. And in fact, he starts to look as ridiculous as he is. But it takes somebody who's very disciplined to be able to do that. And to your exact point, to be able to ignore all of those pitches, let those go by so that you can focus on just one. So, I do think it'll be incumbent upon Kamala Harris to make sure that she's able to focus as opposed to kind of succumbing to the gish gallop that Donald Trump throws at her.
I agree with that, and she can focus on one or two issues or whatever that she wants to contrast him with, whatever they may be, and there's plenty of material to work with, and she can get in little digs by ignoring him, right? And that's gonna get under his skin, right? And just kind of like the old Reagan line was "There you go again," and what she used against Dana Bash is this kind of version of that, right? Which is
Yeah.
like, okay, moving on, next
Yeah.
question, and she is dynamic, she has the look. I think one thing that's really working to her favor in this debate is just like the nonverbal is so much better, right?
Yeah.
Like a younger woman. I mean, she's very in command, compared to what, you were seeing if you like weren't even listening to the words, just like looking at the visuals in the last debate. So that's working in her favor. And I just think a couple of like smirks and brush offs, for her to him would do well on social. And that also then allows you to not have to engage in all that stuff. It's
Right.
just like little eye roll, little brush off, move on to whatever the topic is that she's focused on. So I assume that's the advice that they're giving her. Some people, there have been some leaks that like she's gonna try to bait in and try and really try to like troll him, and I don't really believe those leaks. I think that that's BS. I don't think that that's what that she's gonna try to do.
I completely agree, and I actually did my podcast episode about exactly this point just last week, where Kamala Harris's most potent tool to wield against Trump isn't meeting him at his level. It's not rolling around in the mud with him. It's not responding to every racist bait tactic that he puts forward. It's the polar opposite. It's her ability not to meet him on his level. It's her ability not to respond to all of these racist attacks so that he can, be successful in making it a race that's a referendum on skin color, right? On whiteness versus blackness. And she's been able to brush it off every time. Very similar to what Barack Obama did in 2008, where yes, he was the first black candidate running, but that race wasn't about him being black. He made that race an issue on what he could do for Americans more broadly, and she's following the same playbook here. So I do think that that's a great point in terms of her not just meeting him on his turf and like letting him dictate what the narrative is going to be, but rather her ability to brush him off, which I think is going to make him lose his mind way more than him actually meeting him at his level and going head to head, even on an issue that she's stronger than him at.
Yeah, you've seen this. I mean, you've just seen this with him. I mentioned earlier the Association of Black Journalists. Like,
Yeah,
they weren't really going over the top with him. I mean, they were asking him, pointed questions, and which I think that she should. But I think that trying to throw haymakers is not the. I mean, it's what I want. Like, hey, would I
yeah,
love a 3 minutes of Kamala just going insane about
yeah,
January 6th and ripping his skin off? Yeah, like that would be satisfying. But I just don't know that who you're getting with that, or like what
right.
the point is of that, and I think you get down into Trump's territory very quickly. And she's brought in David Plouffe, who did the '08 race with Obama, so he's very attuned to kind of how to balance all that. Now, obviously, they ran against McCain, so it wasn't exactly the same as running against Obama, Trump, and McCain specifically tried not to use racist attacks, and told his team not to. Then he picked Sarah Palin, who did some racist attacks. So,
Yeah.
a little bit from both sides on that one. But Pluff's been through this, and I think that model is the right one.
Okay, and let's finish off with this, because I think that what we're going to see on Wednesday is, regardless of what happens, some complaints about the moderators. But my view on complaining about the moderators is that inherently, once you start doing that, it looks like you're putting that forward as an excuse for a bad performance. Like, where do you stand on just the punditry pointing to the media in any instance in the aftermath of a debate? And we've seen this before. Like, no one is ever really happy with the moderators. Certainly not the side who performs more poorly. But I'm of the mind that, like, when you're complaining about the moderators, that actually reflects pretty badly on your argument and on your candidate.
Yeah, I agree. Look, there. I guess my exceptions are it's the moderator's job to bring up the relevant topics. Okay, so if the whole the first 30 minutes of the debate is about Kamala's flip-flop on fracking, and they don't mention January 6th, to me that's a fair thing to complain about. And
Yeah,
there's times where you need to work the refs, right? Um, the fact-checking thing and just like kind of whining about all of that and how, oh, the moderators, need to be active and have a job to do. I think that that's asking too much for moderators, and I think that it looks weak, to be honest. I think it's Kamala Harris's job to challenge him. I think it's the news media's job after the debate, during commercials, maybe, certainly, to talk about the things he lied about and provide context and all that. Like, I'm not saying that news media should ignore the truth, but in the confines of the debate itself, I think it makes Kamala look weak to have like David Muir being like, "Excuse me, sir, that's not true about the crime rate," right? Like,
yeah.
that's just not their job. And I think that the complaining about that, actually hurts her more than helps her. So I agree with you. I mean, hopefully we're in unprecedented times. Like, we've never had a criminal running. for president, a convicted criminal. We've never had somebody that's been impeached twice running again. Never had somebody that tried a coup. Right? It's like all these topics should be brought up, and if they like treat him like he's Mitt Romney and don't bring that stuff up, then I think that merits criticism. But beyond that, I think it's up to Kamala, and I think that that's what Team Kamala thinks. I think it's a lot of people around them that do most of the complaining.
Well, of course, we will do a follow-up in the aftermath of this debate, but very much looking forward to it, and definitely good predictions here. Let's finish off with this one prediction, and we're going to hold you to this. And
Oh God.
and it's going to be maybe I'll post it and pin it on the top of my page. Who do you think is going to win this debate?
I kind of want to throw up just thinking about it, Brian. I'm still dealing with trauma from June, but I think she's going to do it. I mean, they put a lot of work in. She's very strong, and Donald Trump, as I keep saying, gives her a lot to work with. So I think that as long as she can stay focused on the contrast, and tell her story to the American people, then I think that she's going to be fine. But I'm nervous about it.
Yeah, well, you should. I think it's healthy for all of us to be nervous at this point.
I mean, I don't know if you noticed, Brian, but he was specifically talking about how political operatives that opposed him need to be jailed earlier this week. Another topic that maybe should be brought up at the debate, by the way. So,
Yeah.
the stakes are a little bit higher than they were for the Dole Clinton debate, I guess. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I guess it wasn't the same level, threat level for those of us on the outside for that one. Well, with that said, to support the work that Tim and his team are doing, which again specifically is giving a permission structure to those Republicans out there, former Republicans, independents, to know that there's a community of people who don't just automatically have to pull the lever for Donald Trump. Please make sure to sign up and subscribe for the Bulwark. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in this post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Tim Miller.
This is Inside the Right.